Good morning, Europe. It's Tuesday, the 8th of March. Let's bring you up to date with our top stories.
Russia's assault on Ukrainian cities continues, but there's renewed hopes of civilian evacuations as Kyiv and Moscow discuss another temporary ceasefire. EU leaders discuss ways to wean the bloc off its dependency on Russian oil and gas, but the Kremlin warns the move would devastate the global economy, pushing the price of oil to $300 a barrel.
And TikTok and Netflix have suspended operations in Russia as Moscow tries to crack down further on independent news.
The United States, France, Germany and Britain have vowed to impose further sanctions on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine as the humanitarian crisis deepens. Moscow has been accused of using medieval siege tactics. Russia is again proposing a temporary ceasefire to evacuate citizens from several cities, but various attempts at this over the weekend failed as shelling continued. An earlier ceasefire was also rejected by Kyiv due to proposed humanitarian corridors leading civilians to Russian territory. And a third round of talks between the two sides ended with Ukraine claiming minor progress.
We've received some positive results in terms of the logistics of humanitarian corridors. They will be changed and we will receive more effective assistance to people who are currently suffering from the aggression of the Russian Federation. In terms of the key political track, which includes a ceasefire, reconciliation and an end to hostilities, intensive consultations will continue.
We hope that from tomorrow these corridors will finally start working. The Ukrainian side has given us its assurances. In addition, the discussion on the political and military aspects continued, but it is difficult and it is too early to talk about anything positive.
In a move backed by Turkey, Foreign Ministers Sergei Lavrov and Ukraine's Dmytro Kuleba have agreed to meet for high-level talks in Antalya on Thursday. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has posted a video from his office in Kyiv saying he is afraid of nothing and is going nowhere. With the Russian military strategy appearing to be one of shell and siege, Ukraine's capital is bracing itself for an attack which it's believed is bound to come. Euronews spoke to senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, Michael Butcherkov, in Lviv. He said Russia has used these tactics before.
So sad. I mean, this is straight out of the Russia playbook, which, we've seen elsewhere in Syria, Chechnya. And the strategy is to encircle heavily populated urban areas, bomb them into submission, and also to push people out. I am starting to believe that with the surge of people going across the border, and remember, originally the upper estimate was 5 million, now they're talking about 10 million, almost a quarter of the Ukrainian population, that Mr. Putin and his circle are weaponizing migration, overburdening Europe with this migration. So a lot of the people I speak to, because this is a humanitarian hub as well, are saying, let's try as much as possible to keep vulnerable people within the borders of Ukraine. But frankly speaking, they have a long way to go in terms of, converting things like stadiums and other facilities to house these IDPs.
Ukrainians are fleeing to neighbouring countries like Poland, Romania and Moldova in what the UN continues to warn could be the biggest refugee crisis this century. Nations across Europe are having to react to a rapidly changing situation. Those bordering Ukraine are seeing the numbers skyrocket as civilians, mostly women and children, flee the war. Poland has received more than 1 million in less than a fortnight. The UN is calling on Russia to allow humanitarian aid into the numerous cities where it's urgently needed.
Ukrainian cities are under siege, under relentless Russian shelling. Hospitals are running out of supplies, food is dwindling, and civilian casualties are mounting while the most vulnerable group, those with disabilities, the elderly, children, continue to bear the brunt of suffering.
We need safe passage for humanitarian supplies into areas of active hostilities. Civilians in places like Mariupol, Kharkiv, Melitopol and elsewhere desperately need aid, especially life-saving medical supplies, the kind that have been brought in these past days by WHO.
Poland's been praised for its generous welcome to Ukrainian citizens. Its government plans to introduce an aid package to fund food and temporary lodgings and arrange access to healthcare.
There's a never-ending flux of Ukrainian refugees crossing the border through Poland. Over 1 million have arrived in the first 10 days of war. The mayor of the border town of Przemysl admits such a fast-paced exodus is stretching local possibilities.
We have no time. We have to collect very quickly all persons from the border because, you know, over the night temperature is -2 or -3, so we can't leave freezing people on the border. It's a difficult situation and probably be more difficult in the near future.
Dozens of buses arrive here night and day. Exhausted refugees receive the basics, food and clothes. Tanya, a chef from Kiev, is looking for a warm jacket for a 7-year-old son before continuing her journey.
We couldn't take anything with us. It was too quick. The bombs were exploding. It was very scary. My child was very scared. We just threw some stuff in the suitcase and left, and ran with almost empty hands.
Other than food and shelter, vulnerable refugees, mostly women and children, need protection.
Every person that leaves will be registered. We will have all the data and the information, personal information about the people who are picking people up, the apartment, the addresses, everything. So we can have the control about the people. Because we know that young girls are disappearing. There are thieves trying to, steal everything what the people have. In one bag they have money, jewelry, because this is all they can pick up from the home, gather and go.
This is the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since the Second World War. As the conflict in Ukraine worsens, Poland says this is just the beginning. The local humanitarian response seems to be already on the brink, while Polish authorities say 3 to 4 more million refugees are to come. Monika Pinna, Przemysl, on the Polish border with Ukraine, Euronews.
Russia snubbed a hearing at the UN's top court on Monday that was called for by Ukraine. Kyiv had asked the International Court of Justice to order Moscow to immediately suspend their military operations, rejecting Vladimir Putin's claim that their purpose was the prevention and punishment of genocide in the separatist regions of Luhansk and Donetsk.
The court regrets the non-appearance of the Russian Federation in these oral proceedings.
The purpose of the war, he said, was to protect people from genocide. This is a horrible lie. Putin lies, and Ukrainians, our citizens, die. Russia consented to your jurisdiction under the Genocide Convention. Now it is abusing and violating that convention in order to kill Ukrainians and destroy Ukraine. Russia must be stopped, and the court has a role to play in stopping it.
A decision on Ukraine's request is expected within days, but observers say a court order to halt hostilities would have virtually no chance of being followed by Vladimir Putin. The ICJ judges could then call for action from the UN Security Council, where Russia holds a veto.
There was supposed to be another day of hearings here at the International Court of Justice today, giving Russia the opportunity to represent its arguments for its invasion of Ukraine. However, they decided not to send any legal representation. That means we've only heard from Ukraine, who yesterday argued that the fact that Russia had not chosen to show up spoke volumes. The fact that they were choosing to be on the battlefield rather than in the courtroom. Now, Ukraine is arguing that Ukraine is not committing genocide against Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine, and therefore the invasion by Russia is illegal. Now, it's not about the crime of aggression, about the actual invasion, but about the Genocide Convention. And they've asked the court to implement provisional measures, including a complete suspension of the military campaign. Now, we'll have to see if the court agrees to that. Usually these decisions take around 2 months, but a spokesperson told me that she hopes it will be considerably faster than that. This is Fernand van Tetz reporting for Euronews, The Hague.
You're watching Good Morning Europe. Time for us to take a break, but we'll be back in a few moments.